My husband emptied our joint account, forged my signature on a loan, then filed for divorce. As soon as everything was through, when I begged him to tell me why, he laughed and said, "You were just a placeholder. My mistress and I have something real." I exposed him immediately. So to defend himself, he spread rumors and told everyone I was having a mental breakdown. That was 15 months ago now. He's sending me desperate text after desperate text, begging me not to go through with it. I always loved my husband's family. His mom was the type of woman to hand you a dress from her wardrobe if she thought it would look better on you. And his sister Daniela was my girl. We'd go on nights out together and go feral. And as we got older, our relationship matured. I helped her get her first job as a personal trainer, and we'd hit the gym together every weekend. She told me I was her first real friend because everyone in high school and college had blocked her. You see, someone in her friendship circle had spread a disgusting rumor that her and her brother were secretly well, let's just say a Sweet Home Alabama situation. So during lockdown, when my husband gained 20 pounds, he was practically dying to lose it. And that's when I made the suggestion that I'll regret forever. I asked if he wanted his sister to move in with us. For context, Daniela was 23 and still living with his parents because she had just finished college. She had an amazing figure and always ate super clean. My husband Daniel's face lit up immediately. "Wait, that's a great idea." He called Daniela and put her on speaker. "Oh my gosh, yes, like a sleepover that never ends." She said it in such a high-pitched voice I thought the glass was going to crack. Lol. She moved in the next weekend with just 2 suitcases and her protein shakes. Classic Daniela. At first, it really was like a daily slumber party. She set up a whole routine for Daniel. 6 a.m. workouts, meal prep Sundays, you know the drill. I'd join them sometimes, but honestly, I was just happy to see him motivated. He kept saying things like, "I need to be around for our future kids," and "I want to be the husband you deserve." And his athletic bod was an added bonus to Lamau. There was something I never expected though. Daniela's wardrobe mainly consisted of maxi skirts and oversized tees, so when she started wearing tight spandex and sports bras around the house, I was surprised. But mainly, I was happy, because I knew it meant that she really felt comfortable around us, until things started getting, intense. I'd wake up to an empty bed and find them in the living room doing partner stretches. When I asked to join, Daniel said I needed my sleep and that my presence threw them off their rhythm. So one day when me and Daniela were doing a yoga sesh together, I asked her to do the same stretch she had done with my husband. So we did, except ours was very different. No face-to-face, no leg-to-leg. In fact, we barely even touched. The whole thing made me feel extremely weird, and I thought back to the rumors Daniela had once told me about. There's no way. I instantly shoved the thought out of my head and hated myself for entertaining it for even a second, but things only got worse. I'd walk into the kitchen after coming home and see Daniela feeding him every meal by hand. They'd sit facing each other while she slowly placed each bite in his mouth, maintaining eye contact the whole time. Their reasoning? Mindful eating requires total focus. Another time I walked into our bedroom and saw Daniela giving my husband a special recovery massage with essential oils. He was lying on my side of the bed, face down, with her straddling his back in the skimpiest gym clothing, all in the name of working on his pressure points. I was basically ready to call it quits by that moment. The relationship, the move-in, all of it. And a week later, I saw something that was so disgusting, I couldn't even lie to myself anymore. I woke up at 2 a.m. to strange noises. I stumbled over to the kitchen and found Daniela and Daniel making a midnight protein shake. Daniela was sitting on the counter in tiny shorts and a sports bra, legs wrapped around my husband's waist, feeding him the shake while he held her hips for balance. I finally snapped. "Daniel, what the F are you doing? That is your sister." He turned to face me, and his eyes were filled with anger. "Oh, so now I can't eat with my sister? Okay, let me just cut off my entire family then. Would that make you happy?" I froze. There was only one time I had been talked to like this before, and it was when I had caught my ex-boyfriend cheating. That's when I knew the rumors had spread for a reason. But I wasn't even angry at Daniela. I couldn't be. She was just a 23-year-old girl, barely getting her groundings in life. Meanwhile, my husband was a 35-year-old grown man. I spent the night in a hotel nearby, and the next morning I texted Daniela that I wasn't mad, but we needed to talk. I told her if she brought my husband, then I would call the police. To my surprise, she actually came alone, and as soon as the hotel room door closed, she broke down in tears. I'd never seen her like this. "I ruined everything," she whispered. I sat down next to her on the carpet. She looked up at me with swollen eyes. "I've been throwing up every morning. When I saw the 2 pink lines, I couldn't believe it." She then looked up at me, trying to gauge my reaction. 3 months. I'm 3 months pregnant. My jaw dropped. She gripped my hand like a lifeline. I couldn't process what she was saying. 3 months meant this started before she even moved in with us. My brain was doing the math while my body just sat there frozen. Daniela kept crying and saying she was sorry over and over. I pulled my hand away and stood up. I needed space to think. She begged me not to hate her. I told her I needed time and asked her to leave. She nodded and walked out, still sobbing. I sat in that hotel room for hours just staring at the wall. Everything made sense now. The weird stretches, the feeding, the massages. It wasn't about fitness at all. I grabbed my phone and texted Daniel that I wanted a divorce. No discussion, no counseling, just done. He responded within minutes saying I was overreacting and being dramatic. I didn't reply. The next morning, I went to our bank to check our accounts. The joint savings was empty. $20,000 gone. The teller showed me the withdrawal slip from yesterday. Daniel had taken everything, claiming it was for medical expenses. I felt sick. I asked for copies of everything and left. I drove to my parents' house and told them everything. My mom's face went white. My dad just shook his head. They didn't believe me at first. My dad said there must be some misunderstanding. My mom asked if I was sure about what I saw. I remembered we had security cameras in our house that backed up to to the cloud. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through footage. I found clips of them in compromising positions. Nothing explicit, but enough to show this wasn't normal sibling behavior. My parents watched in horror. My mom started crying. My dad got angry and said he was going to have a talk with Daniel. I begged him not to. I needed to handle this the right way. I went back to the hotel and started getting texts from mutual friends. Daniela had posted on social media about how I was jealous of their close sibling bond. She said I was making up lies because I couldn't handle Daniel having a female friend, even though that friend was his sister. People were commenting, asking what was going on. Some were taking her side, saying I always seemed controlling. Daniel joined in, posting about how his wife was having a mental breakdown. He said he was worried about me and considering getting me help. He posted old photos of us looking happy with captions about hoping I'd get better soon. It was sick. Our friends started texting me asking if I was okay. Some offered support, but others seemed skeptical of my side. I decided to go back to our house to get some clothes and important documents. When I got there, the locks had been changed. I called a locksmith and showed him my ID with the address. He let me in. Inside, I found stacks of mail that had been hidden, bills, bank statements, and something that made my blood run cold. Divorce papers dated from 2 months ago. Daniel had already filed claiming I was unfaithful. There were fake text messages and emails included as evidence. I took photos of everything and grabbed what I could carry. As I was leaving, Daniela pulled up. She got out of her car and walked toward me. She said we needed to talk about the baby's future. I told her to stay away from me. She started crying again, saying she never meant for this to happen. I got in my car and drove away. I called my lawyer friend Michelle that night. She answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep until she heard the tremor in mine. She said I needed to document everything and start building a case immediately. She recommended a divorce attorney named Christopher, who specialized in complex situations involving family betrayal and financial fraud. I made an appointment for the next day, my hands shaking as I wrote down the address. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those 3 months, replaying every interaction in my mind like a detective reviewing evidence. How many times had they been together while I was at work? How many lies had I believed? I went through my phone looking at photos from the past few months, the blue light burning my tired eyes. There were signs everywhere I'd been too trusting to see. Daniel and Daniela sitting too close at family dinners, their thighs touching under the table, their hands brushing when they thought no one was looking, the way they'd exchanged glances that lasted a hit too long. How did I miss it all? The next morning, I met with Christopher in his downtown office. The building smelled like leather and old money. He looked at the evidence I'd gathered and whistled low, his expression growing more serious with each photo and screenshot. He said Daniel had been planning this for a while, probably months before Daniela even moved in. The fake divorce papers, the emptied accounts, it was all calculated with frightening precision. He told me we needed to act fast before Daniel could do more damage or hide more assets. We filed an emergency motion to freeze any remaining assets that afternoon. Christopher also suggested I check our credit cards and loans for any unusual activity. I pulled up our accounts on my phone with trembling fingers. My heart sank into my stomach. Daniel had taken out a second mortgage on our house using forged signatures. $40,000 borrowed against our home, the place where we'd planned to raise children. The papers were dated last month, right around when he'd started acting more affectionate than usual. I showed Christopher the loan documents, watching his jaw tighten. He said this was fraud, and we could fight it, but his tone suggested it wouldn't be easy. It would take time and money I didn't have. Meanwhile, I needed somewhere safe to stay. My parents' house was too obvious, the first place Daniel would look for me. Michelle offered her spare room without hesitation, and I accepted, grateful for her friendship. That afternoon, I got a call from my boss, Richard. He sounded uncomfortable, clearing his throat several times before speaking. He said Daniela had shown up at the office claiming she needed to discuss urgent family matters with me. She'd made a scene in the lobby when security wouldn't let her up, her voice echoing off the marble walls. She'd cried about being pregnant and needing her sister-in-law's support, clutching her still flat stomach dramatically. My boss asked if everything was okay, genuine concern in his voice. I gave him a brief explanation, and he said he'd alert security not to let her in again, adding that I should take whatever time I needed. But the damage was done. My coworkers were gossiping in hushed tones by the coffee machine. I heard whispers when I walked by, conversations stopping mid-sentence. Some people looked at me with pity, their eyes full of secondhand embarrassment. Others seemed to be judging me, as if I should have known better. I tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every notification on my phone made me jump, my heart racing until I saw it wasn't from Daniel or Daniela. That evening, Daniel's mom called. Her number flashed on my screen and I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. She sounded tired, older than her 60 years. She said she needed to see me urgently. I was suspicious, but agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown, choosing a table by the window where I could see her coming. When she arrived, she looked older somehow, new lines etched around her eyes. She sat down heavily and stared at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. She said she'd been cleaning out the garage and found some old boxes from when the kids were teenagers. Inside was Daniela's diary from high school, covered in faded stickers and doodles. She'd started reading it thinking it would be sweet memories of first crushes and friendship drama. Instead, she found entries that disturbed her deeply, coded language about their secret and no one understanding their bond, references to late-night visits and stolen moments. She pulled out the diary and handed it to me with shaking hands. I flipped through the pages, my stomach churning. The entries were vague but unsettling, written in Daniela's loopy teenage handwriting. She wrote about sneaking into Daniel's room at night when their parents were asleep, about how he was the only one who really knew her, who understood her completely, about how they had to be careful so no one would find out their special connection. My stomach turned as the implications became clear. This had been going on for years, maybe even decades. Daniel's mom started crying, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. She said she'd confronted them separately yesterday. Daniela had broken broken down and admitted nothing, playing the victim as always. But Daniel had gotten defensive, his mask finally slipping. He'd started yelling about how she never understood him, how she'd always favored his younger brother, how Daniela was the only one who ever supported him unconditionally. In his anger, he'd said things that confirmed her worst fears. She'd recorded the conversation on her phone without him knowing, her hands shaking as she held it under the table. She played the recording for me. Daniel's voice was clear despite the slight static. He talked about how their connection was special, beyond what normal people could understand, how I could never understand what they had, how I was just a placeholder, how the baby would make their family complete, finally giving them the life they'd always dreamed of. It was all there, every sick detail, the admission we needed. I thanked her for coming forward, squeezing her hand across the table. It couldn't have been easy to face this truth about her children. She gripped my hand and apologized for raising such children, for not seeing the signs sooner. I told her it wasn't her fault, that predators were good at hiding. She said she'd testify if needed. She'd do whatever it took to make this right, to give me justice. I gave the recording to Christopher the next morning. He said it was exactly what we needed to strengthen our case. With this plus the diary and the security footage, we had a strong case that would be hard to refute. He filed additional motions and started preparing for mediation, warning me that things might get uglier before they got better. Meanwhile, Daniel escalated his campaign against me on social media. He posted more fabricated stories about my mental health, twisting real events to fit his narrative. He shared photos of happy times with captions about hoping his sick wife would get help and return to the loving family waiting for her. Friends kept reaching out asking what was really going on, confused by the conflicting stories. I wanted to defend myself, but Christopher said to stay quiet for now, to let Daniel hang himself with his own lies. Then things got scarier. I started getting texts from unknown numbers at all hours, threats about dropping the divorce, about what would happen to my reputation if I didn't back down, warnings that I'd regret destroying a happy family. One night I came back to Michelle's apartment after work and found my car tires slashed, all 4 of them, cut deep with something sharp. The security camera in the parking garage had conveniently malfunctioned that day, the footage mysteriously corrupted. I was scared but also angry, a cold fury settling in my chest. I bought my own cameras and set them up around Michelle's apartment with her permission. I varied my routine, taking different routes to work and leaving at different times. I kept pepper spray in my purse and my keys between my fingers. Michelle's boyfriend Jordan, a former Marine, started walking me to my car after work without being asked. A week later, the cameras paid off spectacularly. I caught Daniela on video slashing my tires again, her face twisted with rage. She was wearing a hoodie, but her face was clear when she looked up to check for witnesses. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. I called the police immediately and filed a report. They said they'd investigate, but without catching her in the act, it would be hard to prove intent. Christopher used the video to file a restraining order the next day. The judge granted it temporarily after reviewing the evidence. Daniela couldn't come within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. Daniel was furious when he found out. He called from different numbers, leaving increasingly unhinged voicemails about how I was ruining his sister's life, how the stress was bad for the baby, how I'd regret this when I was old and alone. The mediation date arrived on a gray Thursday morning. I wore my best suit, the charcoal one that made me look serious and professional. I tried to look confident even though my stomach was in knots. Daniel showed up with Daniela despite the restraining order, her hand resting possessively on his arm. His lawyer argued she needed to be there because of the pregnancy, claiming she had a right to know how the proceedings would affect her child. The mediator allowed it, but made her sit in a separate room where she could listen, but not participate. Daniel started with his prepared sob story, his voice dripping with false sincerity. He claimed I was jealous and delusional, that I'd always been possessive and couldn't handle him being close to his family. He said I'd imagined the whole relationship because I was threatened by a strong sibling bond. He presented the fake evidence of my supposed cheating, photos clearly doctored but presented as fact. His lawyer was smooth, making me sound unstable and vindictive. But then Christopher presented our evidence methodically. The security footage, the diary entries, the recorded confession from Daniel's own mother. Daniel's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the mediator wanted to see everything. As each piece was revealed, Daniel's carefully constructed story fell apart like wet tissue paper. He started contradicting himself, mixing up dates and details, getting flustered and angry when challenged. His lawyer tried to redirect, but the damage was done. Then Christopher dropped the bomb about the fraud, the forged mortgage documents with my signature clearly faked, the emptied accounts with suspicious transfer patterns. He showed proof that Daniel had been moving money for months, setting up new accounts in just his name, planning his escape with Daniela while I slept beside him. The mediator's face grew stern as she reviewed the financial documents. During a break, I overheard Daniel and his lawyer arguing in harsh whispers. His lawyer wanted him to settle immediately. Daniel refused, his voice rising. He still thought he could win with charm and manipulation. He still thought his version of reality would prevail. But when we reconvened, his lawyer announced they were willing to negotiate, looking defeated. The negotiations were tense and dragged on for hours. Daniel tried to keep the house claiming he needed it for the baby, playing the devoted father card. Christopher shut that down fast with evidence of the fraud. We demanded the house, repayment of the stolen funds, and compensation for the fraud and emotional distress. Daniel's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear as his face grew redder. That's when my coworker Steven arrived as a witness. Christopher had asked him to testify about Daniela's harassment at my workplace. Steven described the scene she'd caused in vivid detail, how she'd screamed about family loyalty and betrayal, spittle flying from her mouth, how she'd tried to push past security guards twice her size, how security had to escort her out as she shouted threats. His testimony painted a picture of systematic harassment and intimidation. The mediator had seen enough. She strongly suggested Daniel accept our terms or face a very unfavorable court battle. His lawyer agreed, looking exhausted, but Daniel lost it completely. He started yelling about how this was his life too, his face purple with rage, how I was stealing everything from him out of spite, how Daniela needed him and their baby deserved better. The mediator threatened to end mediation and send us to court where things would be much worse for him. Finally, Daniel's lawyer got him under control with sharp words and a firm hand on his shoulder. They agreed to most of our terms through gritted teeth. I'd get the house and most of the money back through structured payments. Daniel would take responsibility for the fraudulent loan and pay it off himself. The divorce would be finalized quickly with no chance of appeal. But there was one condition that made my stomach turn. Daniela had to give a deposition admitting to everything. Daniela was brought in looking pale and drawn. She looked smaller somehow, her pregnancy just starting to show. Defeated, she sat down and started talking in a monotone voice. She admitted it all without emotion. The relationship that started in high school, the planning over months, the elaborate lies. She said Daniel had promised they'd be together once I was out of the picture, that they'd raise the baby as a proper family without the shame of their secret. Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reading a grocery list. When she finished, Daniel tried to reach for her across the table. Security stepped in quickly. He was escorted out screaming about love and destiny, about how no one understood their bond. Daniela just sat there staring at nothing, her hands folded over her stomach. Her lawyer led her away gently. The mediator scheduled our final hearing for 2 weeks later. I thought it was over, that the worst had passed. But Daniel wasn't done. That night, he showed up at Michelle's apartment building. He was hammered and pounding on the door so hard the walls shook, demanding to talk to me, saying he could explain everything if I just gave him 5 minutes. Michelle called the police while I hid in the bedroom closet, my heart hammering. They arrested him for violating the restraining order and public intoxication. While in custody, the police searched his car with probable cause. They found evidence that he'd been embezzling from his employer for over a year. Fake invoices, redirected payments, altered contracts, a whole sophisticated scheme to fund his new life with Daniela. His company pressed charges immediately when notified. Christopher said this would help our case even more, showing a pattern of deception and criminal behavior. The final hearing came 2 weeks later on a sunny morning that felt wrong for such a dark occasion. Daniel appeared in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit, out on bail for the criminal charges. His lawyer presented the settlement agreement with obvious reluctance. The judge reviewed everything carefully, asking pointed questions. She asked if I was satisfied with the terms. I said yes in a clear voice. She granted the divorce and approved the settlement with a sharp bang of her gavel. Daniel was ordered to pay restitution for the fraud over 5 years. The house was transferred to my name immediately. The stolen funds would be returned through wage garnishment if necessary, though his job prospects looked dim. His parental rights to Daniela's baby were a separate issue for family court to decide. But our marriage was officially over, dissolved like it had never existed. Outside the courthouse, Daniel's mom hugged me tight. She said I'd always be family to her, the daughter she wished she'd had. She was getting therapy to deal with the reality of who her children were. She'd cut off financial support to both her children until they got serious psychological help. She looked broken, but determined to heal. Daniela had moved back with her parents temporarily, her apartment lease broken. Without Daniel's influence and manipulation, she seemed to realize what she'd done. Her social media went dark overnight. Friends said she was seeing a therapist twice a week. The pregnancy was progressing normally, but she hadn't decided what to do about the baby. Adoption was on the table. Daniel faced trial for embezzlement 6 months later. His lawyer negotiated a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence. 2 years in minimum security prison and full restitution to his company. His reputation in the tech world was destroyed completely. The tech world was small and word spread fast through LinkedIn and industry forums. No one would hire him again, not even for entry-level work. I started rebuilding my life one day at a time. The house felt empty at first, too many memories in every corner, but I made it mine slowly. I painted the walls colors Daniel had hated, warm yellows and soft blues. I got a dog named Reese from the shelter, a German Shepherd mix who barked at strangers and slept by my bed. I installed a better security system with cameras covering every angle. Slowly, I felt safe again in my own home. My real friends stood by me through everything. They admitted they'd always felt something was off about Daniel and Daniela's relationship, but had dismissed their concerns. The way they touched too much, stood too close, whispered too often, but they'd dismissed it as sibling closeness from a tight-knit family. Now they knew better. We formed a stronger bond through the ordeal, their support meaning everything. Work improved too once the gossip died down. My boss Richard was supportive, giving me flexibility when I needed it for legal appointments. My coworkers stopped gossiping after a firm word from HR. Steven became a good friend, checking in regularly and bringing coffee on tough days. I threw myself into projects and earned a promotion 6 months later. The raise helped me afford the mortgage on my own without stress. I started therapy to process everything that had happened, the betrayal that went so deep, the manipulation that had been so subtle, the fear that still crept up sometimes. My therapist helped me see the red flags I'd missed or explained away, how Daniel had isolated me slowly from college friends, how he'd used my trust against me like a weapon. It wasn't my fault, but I needed to heal and learn. 6 months later, I heard through the grapevine that Daniela had the baby, a girl she named Sarah. Daniel's parents were raising her mostly while Daniela struggled with postpartum depression. Daniela was working part-time at a gym and trying to finish her personal training certification online. She'd sent me a letter apologizing again, pages of rambling regret. I didn't respond, but I kept it in a box with other documents from that time. Daniel served his time quietly from what his mother told me. No visits from Daniela after the first month. His parents saw him once a month out of obligation, bringing commissary money and updates about the baby he'd never meet. He wrote me letters too, but I had them returned unopened. Christopher said he'd have to register as as a fraud convict when released, limiting his employment options forever. His life as he'd known it was effectively over. I met someone new at a friend's birthday party 8 months after the divorce. Nancy was kind and patient, with a warm laugh and gentle eyes. She understood my trust issues without judgment and didn't push for more than I could give. We took things slow as molasses, coffee dates that lasted hours, long walks with Reese who loved her immediately, cooking dinner together on weekends. Normal, healthy relationship stuff that felt foreign but good after years of manipulation. The divorce money came through gradually as Daniel worked prison jobs. I paid off the fraudulent loan and had enough left to feel secure for the first time in years. I started saving again in my own accounts, planning for a future that was mine alone to decide. No joint accounts this time, no blind trust in anyone else's financial decisions. Daniel's mom and I had lunch occasionally at the same coffee shop where she'd given me the diary. She updated me on the family with sad eyes. Daniela was trying to be a good mother but struggled with the reality of single parenthood. The baby was healthy and beautiful at least. Daniel would be released soon but had nowhere to go. His parents wouldn't let him come home ever. Daniela wanted nothing to do with him. The spell finally broken. I realized I'd won, but it didn't feel like victory, just survival. I'd kept my integrity and my assets through smart legal help. I'd exposed the truth and found justice in the system, but the scars remained, invisible but real. The knowledge that someone I'd loved completely had betrayed me so deeply, that his own sister had been part of it, had probably initiated it, that I'd shared my bed with a monster for years. Still, I was grateful for so much. For Christopher's legal expertise that saved my future, for Michelle's spare room when I needed safety, for Stephen's testimony that showed I wasn't crazy, for Daniel's mom's courage in facing the truth about her children, for all the people who'd helped me when I needed it most. They'd restored my faith in human decency when it was shattered. The house became a symbol of my recovery over time. Every mortgage payment was a step forward into my new life. Every improvement I made erased more of Daniel's presence from the space. The garage gym became my art studio where I learned to paint. The guest room where Daniela had stayed became my office for the consulting business I started. I reclaimed each space with intention and purpose. I learned to trust my instincts again through therapy and practice. Those moments of discomfort I'd dismissed were warnings my subconscious had tried to send. My body had known something was wrong before my mind accepted it. Now I listened to that inner voice without question. It had saved me once and would again if needed. Nancy and I grew closer over months of patient courtship. She met my parents and they loved her steady presence. She understood why I needed time, why certain things triggered me. She never pushed for more than I could give freely. When I was ready a year later, we made it official. A quiet relationship built on honesty and respect. The day Daniel got out of prison, I was nervous despite all my preparation, but he didn't contact me, honoring the permanent restraining order. His mom said he'd moved to another state for a warehouse job, some minimum wage position, and a studio apartment in a rough neighborhood. Daniela and the baby stayed here with his parents' support. They'd never be together again. The fantasy was over, reality too harsh to ignore. I sometimes wondered in quiet moments what would have happened if I hadn't suggested Daniela move in. Would they have found another way to be together? Was it always inevitable given their twisted history? But those thoughts led nowhere good. I'd made a reasonable suggestion based on the information I had. They'd made terrible choices that destroyed multiple lives. My life settled into a new normal that felt like peace. Work, relationship, friendships, therapy, dog walks, painting. The drama faded into memory like an old photograph. People stopped asking about it, moving on to new gossip. I became just another divorcee starting over in her 30s. It was exactly what I wanted, to be ordinary again, to be free from the weight of their secrets. The last time I saw Daniela was at a grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon. She was pushing a stroller with a toddler inside, looking tired and older. We made eye contact across the cereal aisle. She started to approach, but I shook my head firmly. She nodded and turned away without a word. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, not in this lifetime. But I'd survived it all against the odds. The lies that went so deep, the manipulation that was so calculated, the fear that felt suffocating, the legal battles that drained me. I'd come out stronger and wiser with scars that made me more careful, but not bitter. My life was simpler now, but fuller in ways that mattered, filled with people who actually cared about me without agenda, who showed love through respect and consistency, not control and deception. I was finally free to be myself, and that was everything. The next few months passed in a blur of normalcy that felt strange after all the chaos. I kept expecting something bad to happen, for Daniel to show up or Daniela to start harassing me again, but nothing came, just quiet days at work and peaceful evenings with Nancy. We'd started talking about moving in together, taking things slow but steady. Then one morning I got a call from Daniel's mom. Her voice was shaking. She said Daniela had disappeared with the baby 3 days ago, left a note saying she needed a fresh start somewhere nobody knew their story. She'd emptied her savings account and taken her car. The police said she hadn't committed any crime since she had custody. Daniel's parents were devastated, especially his mom who'd been basically raising little Sarah. I felt bad for them, but honestly, I was relieved. Having Daniela in the same city always made me nervous, even with the restraining order. Now she was someone else's problem in some other state. Daniel's mom asked if I'd heard anything and I said no. She cried a little before hanging up. I never heard from her again after that call. Work was going great though. My promotion came with a nice raise and more responsibility. I was managing a team now, something I'd always wanted. Stephen had become one of my best work friends. We'd grab lunch together and complain about difficult clients. He never brought up the whole mess with Daniel unless I did first. I appreciated that more than he knew. Nancy officially moved in 6 months later. We painted the master bedroom together, getting more paint on ourselves than the walls. Reese loved having another person to spoil him with treats and belly rubs. It felt right having her there, like the house was finally becoming a home again instead of just a place I slept. slept. I found out through social media that Daniel had gotten arrested again. Not for anything with me, thank God. He'd been caught stealing from his new employer, some construction company. Guess he hadn't learned his lesson the first time. Or maybe he just couldn't help himself. Either way, he was looking at more jail time. I blocked his profile after that. I didn't need updates on his downward spiral. My lawyer Christopher called one day with interesting news. He'd been contacted by a lawyer in Oregon representing Daniela. She wanted to formally give up any claim to money or property from Daniel in exchange for me dropping any potential civil suits. I hadn't even been thinking about suing her, but Christopher said to take the deal, get everything in writing and close that chapter completely. So I did. The paperwork came through a month later. Daniela had signed away any rights to anything connected to Daniel or their shared past. In return, I agreed not to pursue any civil action against her for harassment or emotional distress. It felt like the final puzzle piece clicking into place. Legal closure to match the emotional closure I'd been working on in therapy. My therapist said I was making great progress. The nightmares had mostly stopped. I could talk about what happened without my chest getting tight. I'd even started joking about it sometimes, dark humor being my coping mechanism. Nancy would laugh and shake her head when I'd make cracks about my Sweet Home Alabama phase. It felt good to laugh about something that had once destroyed me. I ran into one of Daniel and Daniela's cousins at a coffee shop. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, but I waved her over. We chatted awkwardly for a few minutes. She mentioned the family was pretty much in shambles. Nobody talked about Daniel or Daniela anymore. They'd become the relatives nobody mentioned at holidays. Their parents had moved to a smaller house, downsizing after everything. I wished her well and we parted ways. Nancy and I got engaged on a random Thursday. No big production, just her asking over breakfast if I wanted to make it official. I said yes through a mouthful of scrambled eggs. Very romantic, I know. We both laughed about it. Neither of us wanted a big wedding after everything I'd been through. Just something small with close friends and family who'd stood by us. The wedding planning was refreshingly drama-free. My parents were thrilled. Nancy's family welcomed me with open arms. We found a small venue by the lake and kept the guest list under 30 people. No distant relatives or obligatory invites. Just the people who really mattered to us. Michelle was my maid of honor, obviously. She'd earned that spot by being there when I needed her most. I got a weird email one day from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line just said, "Please read." It was from Daniela. She said she was living in Maine now, working at a daycare. She'd met someone who didn't know about her past. She was trying to be a good mom to Sarah. She said she was sorry again and hoped I was happy. I deleted it without responding. Some doors needed to stay closed. The wedding day was perfect in its simplicity. Nancy looked beautiful in her simple white dress. I wore a suit that made me feel like myself. Reese was our ring bearer, though he tried to eat the pillow halfway down the aisle. Everyone laughed. It was exactly the kind of moment we wanted, real and imperfect and full of joy. My dad walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. He whispered that he was proud of how strong I'd become. That meant everything to me. The ceremony was short and sweet. We wrote our own vows, promising to be honest and kind and patient with each other, to build something real together. When we kissed, everyone cheered so loud it scared some birds from the trees. The reception was basically a big barbecue by the lake. Good food, better company, and dancing until the sun went down. Stephen gave a speech about how he'd watched me rebuild my life with grace. Michelle told embarrassing stories about our college days. Nancy's sister welcomed me to the family with a toast that made everyone cry happy tears. It was everything a wedding should be. We went to Costa Rica for our honeymoon, 2 weeks of beaches and rainforests and no cell service. It was the first time I'd felt truly disconnected from everything since the divorce. We ziplined through the canopy and saw monkeys and ate too much fresh fruit. I didn't think about Daniel or Daniela once. They'd become footnotes in my story instead of main characters. When we got back, there was a letter from Daniel's mom in our mailbox. She'd sent a wedding gift even though she wasn't invited. A beautiful crystal vase with a note saying she was happy I'd found peace. She included a photo of Sarah, who looked just like Daniela at that age. I kept the vase but threw away the photo. Some connections were better left in the past. Life settled into a new routine. Work, home, dog walks, dinner with Nancy, weekend trips to farmers markets. Boring stuff that felt like luxury after years of drama. We started talking about kids maybe, fostering or adopting. Building a family the right way, with intention and love and stability. Reese would be a great big brother. I heard Daniel got out of jail again and immediately left the state. His parole officer told Christopher he'd moved to Florida for some under-the-table construction work. As long as he stayed away from me, I didn't care where he went. The restraining order was permanent and nationwide. One violation and he'd be back in jail for a long time. My business grew enough that I could hire an assistant, a young woman named Kayla who reminded me of myself at that age, eager and smart and a little naive. I found myself mentoring her, teaching her about more than just work, about trusting her instincts and setting boundaries and not accepting less than she deserved. She absorbed it all like a sponge. Nancy and I bought a bigger house in a better neighborhood. The old house sold quickly to a young couple just starting out. I hoped they'd be happier there than I'd been. We moved on a Saturday with help from friends, Reese supervising from his dog bed. The new place had a huge backyard and an extra bedroom for the kids we were planning to foster. I ran into an old mutual friend at the grocery store. She said she'd heard Daniel was in rehab now, drinking problem apparently, and Daniela had gotten married to some guy she met online, moved to his ranch in Montana or something. I nodded politely but didn't ask for details. Their lives weren't my concern anymore, hadn't been for years. The fostering process took months, but we were approved eventually. Our first placement was a teenage boy named Jordan who'd been through multiple homes. He was angry and scared and reminded me of myself after the divorce. We gave him space and consistency, and slowly he started to trust us. When he called me mom for the first time, I cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes. Work continued to go well. I got another promotion and was now running an entire department. Stephen had had moved to a different company, but we still met for lunch monthly. He'd gotten engaged to a sweet guy named Ronald who made him stupidly happy. I was invited to their wedding, of course. It was nice seeing love work out for other people too. Daniel's dad died suddenly of a heart attack. His mom called to tell me, not asking me to come to the funeral, but just wanting me to know. I sent flowers, but didn't attend. She said Daniel had shown up hammered and made a scene, had to be escorted out by his brother. Daniela didn't come at all, too far away or too ashamed. Their family was broken beyond repair. Jordan officially became ours after a year. The adoption ceremony was small but meaningful. He'd grown so much, from an angry kid to a thoughtful young man. He was applying to colleges now, wanting to be a social worker to help kids like him. Nancy and I were so proud we could barely contain it. This was the family we were meant to have. I got one last email from Daniela on what would have been my anniversary with Daniel. She was getting divorced. Her husband had found out about her past. She wanted to know if I'd forgive her, if we could start over as friends. I stared at the email for a long time before deleting it. Some people you forgave from a distance. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged no matter how much time passed. The truth was, I had forgiven her in my own way. Not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying that anger was too heavy. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or letting someone back in your life. It just meant releasing the hold they had on your emotions. She was a stranger to me now, someone I used to know in a different life. Nancy and I celebrated our 5th anniversary with a trip to Italy. We ate too much pasta and drank wine in tiny cafes and held hands while walking through ancient streets. I thought about how different this marriage was from my first, built on truth and respect instead of lies and manipulation. We were partners in the real sense, supporting each other through everything. Jordan graduated high school with honors. We threw him a big party in the backyard, all his friends and our family celebrating together. He was headed to state college in the fall on a partial scholarship. During his speech, he thanked us for showing him what a real family looked like. Nancy and I held hands under the table, both trying not to cry. I never heard from Daniel again after his dad's funeral. Sometimes I wondered if he was even still alive, but I never Googled him. That chapter was closed and sealed. I had everything I needed now. A loving wife, an amazing son, a successful career, true friends, and peace of mind. The life I'd rebuilt from the ashes was so much better than what I'd lost. Looking at my life now, you'd never know about the drama from a decade ago. Just a normal suburban family living their lives. Jordan off at college, Nancy and I planning our next foster placement, Reese getting gray around his muzzle but still eager for walks. Boring, beautiful normalcy that I'd fought so hard to achieve.